States, Canada, and Tokyo, Japan. This is the Rich Stevens Radio Network.
All right, here we go. How are you? I'm Rich Stevens. Welcome to the broadcast on this, what are we, Wednesday now. I can't believe that the week has gone by so fast already. I don't know, we're halfway through. Let me tell you where we're at today. Those 9 American citizens that were killed in the ambush in Mexico, we're learning more about that now. Dozens of self-driving Uber cars, for some reason, have crashed. Sondland reverses on Ukraine. Now he confirms that the president did have a quid pro quo. Wait till I tell you the story, too. And Facebook changes their logo to all capital letters. Those are just some of the stories I'll tell you about coming up here on the Rich Stevens Show. Temperatures are expected to dip nearly 20 degrees below average this week. Not for us. I'm talking about the northeastern part of the United States. The National Weather Service is saying that the temps are going to remain below average from the Great Plains to the Northeast, making this week's weather the coldest of the fall season so far. And yes, we're going to get some of that, but nowhere near those kind of temperatures. We'll dip into the 60s, supposedly, coming up on the weekend. I told you about that yesterday. But this dramatic change in weather is going to see places like New York City dropping from 62 yesterday to 44 by Friday. And, of course, then there's the threat of snow giving way to the chilly rain. But the wind is expected to be brutal. They're saying in the Big Apple that the wind should be like Chicago winds. If you've ever been to Chicago in the wintertime, those winds, I mean, they call it the Windy City because of this. It is literally brutal. I mean, they're expecting in New York 2 to 4 inches, and also residents in the southern plains, mid-lower Mississippi Valley, heavy rain, possible flash flooding. Yesterday, the forecasters warned millions of residents in the Midwest to the Northeast, get ready for this winter-like week with the possibility of snow by Friday. And the possibility of snow in New York City appears to be fading away right now, but the forecast is still showing that freezing rain for the tri-state area. And that's just, that's not a fun thing. When I lived in St. Louis was my first experience with freezing rain. I'll never forget leaving a party and getting on Interstate 70 to go back to my house. And I was probably on the road maybe 3-4 minutes, and all of a sudden the rain is coming down. And what it does is, it's the scariest thing ever. It actually freezes as it hits your windshield. And of course the windshield wipers are useless, doesn't do a thing. So you see everybody pulling over to the side of the road. But I also saw some people have figured out the trick. You have to have an ice scraper, and you scrape it, as you're driving, a little bit of a kind of like, almost like a peephole kind of thing. But the roads get all slicked up too. It's just really dangerous. That happens in St. Louis a lot. But after that first time, it wasn't as shocking. But that first time, I got to tell you, my God, I never experienced anything like that in my life. Speaking of experiences, Thanksgiving over the last several years has, they keep coming up with all kinds of different products, food things like the turducken, remember that? Well, now Pringles, who for the past, I guess it's 3 or 4 years, keep coming out with different holiday flavors. Now they're announcing the turducken chips. Now, if you're not sure of what a turducken is, and they're really good, by the way, it's when you cook a chicken inside of a duck, inside of a turkey. And it's not cheap, but it's really good. So anyway, Pringles has created the duck, turkey, chicken flavored chips. And when you stack them on top of each other, you get the turducken. These are all part of their Friendsgiving Feast Turducken kit, which in addition comes with chips that taste like cranberry sauce, stuffing, and pumpkin pie. Doesn't sound good at all, by the way. If you're curious, this will run you back $16, about $5 for shipping, and they're going to go on sale tomorrow at noon at the kelloggstore.com. So you probably want to get there pretty quick if you're interested in this, because last year they sold out in less than an hour. Literally sold out every single one they had. Speaking of sellouts, Gordon Sondland, who's the U.S. ambassador to the European Union, has given some new details about his dealings with Ukraine. Now, yesterday, in sworn testimony, that was confirmed that he told a top official in Ukraine that the country would not receive U.S. military aid unless they agreed to launch the investigations which were requested by President Trump. And of course, Trump continues to insist that he didn't do anything wrong, and there was, in fact, no quid pro quo with Ukraine. And this issue is the heart of the impeachment inquiry against the president launched by these people on the left, the Democrats. So here's the thing that's so strange. This guy gave about 10, 11 hours of an interview back in September, and now he's released this new testimony with more details. He goes further in depth to recount his part in telling the Ukrainians that they had to make good on the demands of the president's personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani. And Sondland said that by early September, he was sure the military aid at a White House meeting would only be granted if Ukraine, in fact, agreed to launch those investigations. But isn't it weird how his story all of a sudden changed and got into more details? And by the way, this was submitted on a 3-4 page document under oath, which really means nothing. It's amusing to me. I got to tell you. There's of course, here in South Florida, there's a librarian requested to buy a digital subscription of the New York Times for the library. It was denied by local lawmakers who said that Donald Trump's claim of fake news is true. Now, this happened last month. There was a meeting in the Citrus County Board of Commissioners to request to approve this digital subscription. Get this, for about $3,000 a year. They presented it, but nobody ever voted on it. So Commissioner Rob Kitchen said, do we really need to subscribe to the New York Times? And another commissioner answered by saying, fake news. Okay, I agree with President Trump. I don't want the New York Times in this county. I don't agree with it. I don't like them. And it's all fake news, and I'm voting no. This is why the president is taking up residence in Florida, because the people in Florida support President Trump. And speaking of support, here's one that I was affected by. When I tell you the story, you'll remember this. AT&T has agreed to a $60 million settlement because the government said that they misled their customers on those unlimited data plans by slowing down service for heavy users. Now, the FTC said yesterday that AT&T will automatically provide partial refunds to customers who signed up for the unlimited wireless plans before 2011. That's me, which is when the company introduced their throttling policy to slow down data after you got to a certain point. That certain point was 24 gigabyte. And when I was doing the Facebook Live stuff, when that all came about, I would get about 2 weeks out of doing the entire show, and then all of a sudden the thing would slow down and at a snail's pace and would keep recycling around saying, connection lost, because they were throttling me. In 2014, the FTC also sued AT&T for not telling customers about the certain amount of data when you hit that, and then they slowed down their speeds. And if you wanted to even look on something on Google or something, you couldn't do it because it was too slow. So back then, AT&T said, well, it only affected 3.5 million people. And they say that AT&T is in fact required to not only tell customers, but very prominently if data speeds or amounts are restricted. So there's a big difference going on here. So now they say they may slow down your speeds on an unlimited plan after a certain amount of data, which is what they've said all along. But now it's got to be in your face, so you got to know what it is. Now, I left AT&T, by the way, and I was with them for years. Switched over to T-Mobile. Much better rates, much better service. They don't do the throttling, and it's unlimited. But because I was a customer of AT&T prior to 2011 with the unlimited plan, I'm going to get a little check in the mail. But don't get too excited because the checks are probably going to be about $2 a person. In 2010, there was another fine, $100 million by the FCC because of the deceptive sales techniques that they used. These companies, I mean, they just need to come clean and not try this, fake advertising. I can attest to the fact that T-Mobile is probably, and again, the price is less than half of what I was paying AT&T for so many years. And you remember back in the day, I think it was the late 80s or early 90s when cell phone service, I'll never forget. You'll appreciate this. I'll never forget when I got my first cell phone. And it was like one of those big, they called it a brick. It was a Motorola. And I went with my friend Duff. This is when I lived in Orlando. We had a hookup with somebody at AT&T. Actually, it was called Cellular One back then. And we were getting the phones for free. This is when they were doing all kinds of deals when it was first coming out. And we got a bunch of free credits and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, we went to the AT&T store in Orlando, a Cellular One store, I'm sorry. And we both got these phones. And then when we were driving back to the radio station, we called each other. We're talking on the phone to say, can't believe that we're in a car talking on the phone. And this wasn't that long ago, if you think about it, in all reality. Anyway, long story short, it happened to both of us and everybody that got phones at that time. We would get the phone bill at the end of the month, and it was like $1,200, $1,300 for local calls. It wasn't even long distance. And then we'd have to call our friend at Cellular One, and they'd adjust the bill down to, what it was supposed to be. But you just don't realize, or you didn't realize, I should say, back then, how quickly your cell service added up. And what's so funny about it is, $1,100 phone bill. I'll never forget. I almost had a heart attack when I opened up that envelope with the bill. I didn't even think it was going to be anything like that. And now I pay $30 a month for better service with a better phone. And that phone can do much more than just dial. The only difference, I'll tell you, is that those brick phones from Motorola, you can actually throw them in the pool and they'll still work. You could throw them, bash them on the concrete. They won't break. But they were huge. Very cumbersome, too. All right, so the former National Security Advisor, John Bolton, is supposed to testify on Thursday, tomorrow, at President Trump's impeachment inquiry. But he's going to refuse. This is what we're hearing anyway. Democrats called Bolton, along with 11 other witnesses, to these closed-door interviews in the next few weeks. This is nowhere near an end. And the White House and Congress are, of course, in this legal battle over what investigators have to compel witnesses' testimony. So even though the reports say Bolton was expected to appear, apparently there's a reporter that says Bolton has no plans to testify and nothing in his posture has changed, per a source with direct knowledge, again, with the sources. And the committee can put him on a schedule, but people shouldn't get too excited because he's not going to show up. And speaking of showing up, this is one of those things where you got to be careful. I learned a lesson a long time ago, so I can kind of relate, but nothing as big as this. Amy Robach from ABC News has been caught in a hot mic situation revealing how she filmed an interview with Jeffrey Epstein's sex slave, Virginia Roberts, and then she spent 3 years trying to get it on the air, and they never put it on the air. They hushed it up. Project Veritas got the video of Robach in a discussion with her producer saying, I've had this interview for years. I've had this interview with Virginia Roberts. We could not put it on the air. And then she goes on to list off the reasons why the story actually never made it on ABC television, saying that the palace threatened to sue the network, and there were concerns that Prince William and Kate Middleton would no longer grant the network any interviews. Now, the official statement from ABC says, at the time, not all of our reporting met our standards to air, but we have never stopped investigating the story. Ever since we've had a team on this investigation and substantial resources dedicated to it, that work led to a 2-hour documentary and a 6-part podcast that they're going to air in the new year. They're trying to cover their asses here. Anyway, the hot mic video was recorded in August, just 2 months after the president of ABC News was pictured dining with Prince Charles and President Trump at Winfield House during the recent state visit. Now, then Prime Minister Theresa May and Sarah Huckabee were also seated at the same table with the 3 men. Now, Roberts herself responded to the video yesterday, and she tweeted, I'm quoting now, "It's infuriating that we could have put an end to Epstein's abuse years ago, but I wasn't believed. I am sick of BS media scrambling around for more evidence. It's there in black and white, and this was a murder case. Or if this was a murder case, you would have all had the evidence that you needed." Here, listen to the open mic thing, because it's very interesting to hear what she says. She didn't know the mic was on. She didn't know the camera was rolling.
I've had the story for 3 years. I've had this interview with Virginia Roberts. We would not put it on the air. First of all, I was told, who's Jeffrey Epstein? No one knows who that is. This is a stupid story. Then the palace found out that we had her whole allegations about Prince Andrew and threatened us a million different ways. We were so afraid we wouldn't be able to interview Kate and Will that also quashed the story. And then Alan Dershowitz was also implicated in it because of the planes. She told me everything. She had pictures. She had everything. She was in hiding for 12 years. We convinced her to come out. We convinced her to talk to us. It was unbelievable what we had. Clinton. We had everything. I tried for 3 years to get it on, to no avail, and now it's all coming out, and it's like these new revelations, and I freaking had all of it. I'm so pissed right now. Like, every day I get more and more pissed because I'm just like, oh my God, what we had was unreal.
Let me ask you a question. That's pretty interesting audio, isn't it? In Project Veritas, they're going to come out with more stuff before the election too, just like they did last time in 2016. If you knew that you could take a test and find out what kind of diseases you possibly could have in your life, would you want to do it? See, I know we have tests like that today, but this is a little bit different. I wouldn't want to do it. I got enough stuff to stress about. But they're saying young lives could be saved by this special DNA test, which scientists revealed about this yesterday. And the screening process actually looks for inherited diseases in babies. And this way it allows the doctors to get a head start in treatment on conditions like cystic fibrosis, lethal diseases that can be stopped in their tracks, they say, in epilepsy. Now, it's very interesting because in a revolutionary NHS pilot scheme succeeds, the test could be introduced all over the country, and this would be a world's first kind of test like this. The pilot actually involves about 30,000 babies having whole sequencing, they call it, to identify conditions that have a high chance of developing in their early years. Now, they say 1 in 300 babies born in the UK every year develops a serious disease that could be treated in the first 5 years. And Genomics England, which is a company owned by the Department of Health and Social Care, runs the project, and they're working with universities and pharmaceutical firms to, get this out there and have people do it. 100,000 Genomes Projects, which the pilot is linked to, was the brainchild of David Cameron, who launched it back in 2012. And he did it after his son Ivan died from a rare neurological disorder. It always takes something or somebody with a personal, unfortunately tragic story to, get into a position like this. There's some interesting news in Broward County. A sheriff's deputy who worked at a school for children with emotional and behavioral problems is now facing felony charges after a video shows him slamming a female student to the ground after it looked like she tapped his knee with her foot. Others are saying in the video it looks like she kicked the deputy, but still, this Broward County deputy, Willard Miller, was charged yesterday with felony child abuse without great bodily harm in this little confrontation. This happened at Cross Creek School in Pompano Beach back in September. But the school security video was just released and shows Miller standing inside this, I guess, a hallway area at Cross Creek School. He was on the phone, and this 15-year-old female walks behind him, uses her left foot to push back the right knee of the deputy. It caused it kind of like to buckle. Now, there's no audio on the video, and of course, we don't know what happened before it, but Miller is seen talking to the girl for about 30 seconds, about 10 feet away, and two women are watching the argument unfold, and then he suddenly walks towards the girl and grabs her throat and threw it to the ground. And then he flips her onto her stomach and puts a knee against her back and pulls her arms behind her. And then he forcibly lifts up the girl using her pinned arms and throws her out of the room. Now, the Broward County Sheriff, Gregory Toney, would not say what Miller and the girl said to each other after this supposed knee tap, or whatever you want to call it. But he said nothing that the girl said or did justified this deputy's action. And the byproduct of his actions were deplorable, according to the sheriff. They were uncalled for, and they violated multiple policies just on the optics. He says, I would hope that every cop in America would disagree with that type of response. And he goes on to say Miller has been suspended without pay until internal disciplinary procedures are complete. And this incident is really strange. It's at least the fourth incident, the fourth time this year, that a Broward County deputy has been charged with using excessive force unnecessarily. It's just, it's scary times we live in, and people should realize there's video everywhere. Speaking of foolishness, Al Sharpton said he had a no-holds-barred meeting with Mark Zuckerberg at the Facebook CEO's home on Monday night over the company's decision not to fact-check ads and other content from politicians. Why is Al Sharpton involved in this? Or why is Al Sharpton involved in anything? So Sharpton says the meeting was about 2 hours at Zuckerberg's Palo Alto home, including multiple civil rights activists and Facebook Chief Operating Officer Sheryl Sandberg. And Sharpton said, we told him that we feel the exemption for politicians could be used to suppress voting, give wrong messaging, and could surpass census taking. Sharpton said he listened, and he sent Zuckerberg a letter to request a meeting. That's how it came about. He made no firm commitments of change, but he seemed open, according to Sharpton. Facebook said in a statement it was grateful that the civil rights leaders took the time to attend the dinner with Zuckerberg and Sandberg, and they discussed a wide range of important issues, and we look forward to continuing these conversations, according to the statement. Now, Zuckerberg told Congress, you might recall last month, that Facebook would take down content from politicians that could risk voter or census suppressions. And Sharpton says, however, he thought that a wide array of content from politicians could indirectly cause this suppression that they're talking about. And ahead of the U.S. presidential election, less than a year from now, Facebook's policy has also been slammed by Democratic candidates and was recently criticized by some of its employees in an internal letter. It has to do with Twitter's decision last week to ban all political advertising, and that's heightened the scrutiny of its larger rival stance, i.e. Facebook. So Zuckerberg defended the policy in an earnings call last week, saying that Facebook did not want to stifle political speech. He also estimated that ads from politicians would be less than 0.5% of revenue next year. But Sharpton, who had sent this letter to Zuckerberg requesting a meeting, said he would next ask for a meeting with Alphabet's Google about their stance on the same issue. And he also wants to meet with the CEO of Twitter, Jack Dorsey. Come on. Al Sharpton? I just have two words to say. Tawana Brawley. Come on. Who takes Al Sharpton seriously? How he got a meeting with Zuckerberg is just mind-blowing to me, that somebody would actually sit down for 2 hours with Al Sharpton. Especially when there's so many things, I've said this so often, there's so many things going on in the black communities across America, and that's where Sharpton should get involved with, but because there's no camera time, Sharpton doesn't want to, have anything to do with that. I mean, there's things that go on right here in South Florida, West Palm Beach and Riviera Beach, that same area over there. There's shootings every single day, just like there's shootings every weekend, 40, 50, 60 shootings in Chicago. Why not go there, Al Sharpton, where you could help your own people? I mean, they deserve help too, don't they? And speaking of help, there's a 911 dispatch supervisor was watching Netflix while a woman was pleading for emergency help after she fell victim to a drive-by shooting. Guadalupe Herrera frantically dialed 911. This is back on June 9th to report that someone just shot at her car with the bullet piercing the back window, striking her front windshield and almost missing her head. Now, this person at the Coral Springs police dispatcher said help was on the way, but then there was a 34-minute delay in the call being dispatched to police, and they never arrived. The woman said it was a very hard situation. It was a drive-by shooting. Her windshield was shattered and nobody came when she called 911. Julie Vidal has been identified as the shift supervisor on that night of the shooting. Now, she never directly spoke to the woman, but is accused of catastrophic failure to manage the handling of the call. About 16 minutes after this woman first called and dialed 911, very upset and concerned that they may shoot again, another 4 minutes passed by without any signs of police assistance. So she was terrified, decided to take matters into her own hands and drive herself to the Coral Springs police station. And then investigators later learned that the call had been logged by dispatchers, not as a drive-by shooting, but it was logged as a suspicious incident rather than a priority shooting. So they're trying to figure out how the error occurred and how could the supervisor have missed it. So they launched an internal affairs investigation, and as part of the probe, they pulled data from the supervisor's computer over a 30-day period. Get this, ready? They found out that she was using applications like Netflix, Hulu, and Xfinity TV, and they found the movie I Am Mother, starring Hilary Swank, played at her workstation for almost 2 hours while this shooting happened back on June 9th. And during that same shift, they checked her search history, also showed numerous site clicks for websites relating to shopping, news stories, streaming TV, movies, vacation planning, and several others that could be considered work-related. Could not, I should say. But can you imagine? So there's a whole big investigation going on, needless to say, and there should be. And I think I told you this yesterday or the day before. It is a very scary thing when you make a call to 911 and there's nobody either answering or nobody responding, which is the same thing in this case. Oh, and I got to tell you, there's another Popeye's chicken sandwich story. I shouldn't laugh because this is another serious situation. Somebody died yesterday or Monday, and in California, another person fell victim to the Popeye's chicken sandwich craziness. She brazenly attempted to cut in line at the drive-thru, and then she ended up destroying her own car. I mean, you talk about instant karma. She was captured on video by a bunch of people that were at the Los Angeles branch of Popeyes, this particular location, and the woman was driving a silver Mercedes, and you can see on the video that she's trying to force her vehicle between a pillar and in front of another car in line. And despite the opening being quite obviously too narrow for a car to fit through, the woman advances regardless, purposely scraping the passenger side of a car against a concrete post. Destroyed a car. What's the matter with people today? I mean, you just have to sit back and just say, hey, you know what? Life was meant to be fun. We shouldn't have issues like this. And the chicken sandwich is not going anywhere. So stop already. We've had enough. By the way, I want to leave you with one last thing here. There's another scam phone call that's going around. I got the call. So I want you to listen to the voicemail. And if you get a call like this, it does sound intimidating a little bit, but it's not true. It's a scam. The IRS will never, ever call you and tell you that you need to do what this call says. Here, listen.
Hello, this call is from the Investigation Department of Social Security Administration. This is to inform you that your Social Security number is being suspended, and there is an arrest warrant being issued under your name. To talk to an officer, press 1. I repeat, to know more about the case, press 1.
So remember, if you get a call like that, don't press 1. As soon as they start talking, just hang up the phone. Public service message from the Rich Stevens Show. Hey, thanks for listening. Have a great Wednesday. Get ready for that cool front that's coming here in South Florida in just another day or two. I appreciate you listening. Don't forget richstevenshow.com or 305-707-7878. Want to get in touch with me, or you click that contact form at richstevenshow.com. Have a great Wednesday. Thanks for listening.